My name is Natalie Morgan. I am 28 years old, and I have just officially received my MBA degree from Stanford, a milestone that cost me years of youth, tears, and sleepless nights to achieve. To celebrate this accomplishment, I organized a formal dinner at an upscale French restaurant in the heart of San Francisco. I chose everything. From the guest list, which included my parents, my younger sister, and a few close relatives, to the menu of fine wine, steak, and escargot. I wanted tonight to be the rare occasion when my family would finally see and acknowledge my efforts. This was supposed to be my night, a night where the spotlight illuminated the journey I had fought so hard to complete. Yet, when my father, David, stood up and raised his glass, I heard the same words I had heard all my life. Emily, you are the one who truly makes us proud. You are responsible, successful, independent, and you don't need anyone. His voice was firm, deliberate, as though the speech had been carefully prepared solely to praise my younger sister. My mother, Linda, immediately joined in, her eyes gleaming as they settled on Emily. That's right. At just 25, my youngest daughter is already a PR manager in New York, talented and beautiful, standing strong on her own. Absolutely wonderful. I sat there, silent, forcing a smile while my chest tightened. I had paid for every crisp white tablecloth, every bottle of rich red wine, yet somehow I had become the most invisible person at my own celebration. Emily, in her striking red dress, lifted her glass with a proud smile, declaring how happy she was not to depend on anyone. I heard every word clearly, and each one cut into me like a knife. For the past 2 years, I had been sending her $5,000 every month, funding the extravagant Manhattan lifestyle my parents never stopped praising. I set my glass down, took a deep breath, and looked straight at my sister. My voice was calm, but every word carried a coldness sharp enough to make the entire table stop breathing. Perfect, I said, a faint smile tugging at my lips. Then from today on, you won't be needing the $5,000 I've been sending you anymore. The room shattered in an instant. The clink of silverware against porcelain rang out, then everything sank into a heavy silence. Emily's face drained of color, her eyes wide with panic. My parents sat frozen, as if they had just watched a curtain drop to reveal a truth they had never imagined. In that moment, my graduation dinner was no longer a family celebration, it became the opening scene of a real confrontation. Before I continue this story, I have a question for you. Have you ever been dismissed by your own family, compared to the so-called golden child, while all your true efforts went unnoticed? And where are you watching this from? Leave a comment below so I know I'm not alone. I still remember clearly the family holidays over the years, where favoritism played on repeat like an old record, echoing so often that I no longer knew how to react except with silence. Every Thanksgiving, my parents' wooden house on the outskirts of Sacramento filled with laughter, the smell of roasted turkey, and the warm glow of golden lights. Chairs scraped across the floor, wine was poured, mashed potatoes were passed around, and of course, when my father raised his glass, the spotlight always landed on Emily. This is my youngest daughter, Emily, a PR manager in New York. She truly makes us proud, he declared as if he were delivering a speech to a crowd. My mother jumped in right away, her face radiant. She's not only beautiful but also independent, never needing anyone to look after her. The whole table nodded and laughed, while I sat there, head down, picking at a piece of turkey on my plate, pretending to be too busy eating to show the loneliness that weighed on me. Christmas Eve was no different. As everyone gathered around the sparkling tree, exchanging small gifts, my parents once again seized the chance to boast about Emily to relatives and neighbors who dropped by. She just bought an apartment in Manhattan, my father said with pride, while I knew full well that the apartment was being kept afloat by the monthly payments I sent. She also manages a big team, such a bright future ahead, my mother added, her eyes shining as if every achievement my sister exaggerated was another medal pinned to her chest. And when someone asked how I was doing, my father brushed it off with a short reply. She's still glued to her computer. I've told her countless times to find a real job. His words landed in everyone's ears like undeniable truth, leaving me feeling small and invisible in a room lit with Christmas lights. Even on birthdays, when I should have been the one celebrated, I was always overshadowed. On my 27th birthday, I went home hoping for a small gathering, maybe a simple cake. But that night, Emily showed up in a new designer dress, and the entire evening revolved around her showing off her new project at work. My parents and relatives kept asking her questions, showering her with praise, while the only gift I received was a scarf my mother handed me absent-mindedly before turning back to discuss Emily's upcoming vacation. I sat there quietly, the candles on my cake burning down almost to nothing, unnoticed by everyone. What hurt me most was not just the favoritism, but the fact that my parents had never once truly asked me, "What are you working on? Are you doing okay? What have you accomplished?" They only saw the surface, the old car I drove, the plain clothes I wore, the modest apartment I rented, and concluded that I was a failure. In their eyes, a child's worth was measured by appearances and flashy titles. And in that game, Emily always won by a landslide, while I was pushed aside like an unnecessary pawn. Many times, I tried to reveal just a little about what I was doing. I told them I was building an online education platform, that we had just signed a contract with a major university, that student registrations had already passed 10,000. But instead of showing interest, my father waved it off. "You should think about applying to Google or Apple. That's what a real job looks like." My mother, meanwhile, gave me a look tinged with pity. "If you keep doing these little things, when will you ever be stable enough to think about starting a family?" Those words fell heavy, like stones, crushing every spark of effort inside me. I learned to swallow them down, hiding them deep in my chest, a place already crowded with invisible wounds. And so, year after year, from family dinners to holiday gatherings, I lived in Emily's shadow. My sister gradually became the symbol my parents paraded around to brag about, while I became the cautionary tale, the example of a so-called wayward child. The pain didn't come from one single event, but from the accumulation of hundreds of small moments, repeated over and over, pressing down on me like layers of dust settling thick on a bookshelf. To someone who only judged by appearances, I might have seemed like nothing more than an ordinary woman, with nothing remarkable to show. I didn't wear designer dresses, I didn't carry Louis Vuitton or Chanel bags, I didn't drive an expensive sports car. Every morning, I got into my old Honda Civic, driving from my rented two-bedroom apartment in Palo Alto to the small office I had built with 3 co-founders. That apartment was far from luxurious. Faded beige walls, a few plants I tried to care for but always seemed to wither, and a simple desk where I spread out my papers and laptop, working late into the night. If my parents were to step inside, they would shake their heads, taking it as proof of the failure they had always labeled me with. But the truth was something entirely different. 4 years ago, while my classmates rushed to secure positions at major financial firms or prestigious tech companies, I chose a different path. To build something of my own. I saw a gap in online education. Millions of international students wanted access to quality learning materials but were blocked by cost, language, and lack of connection. I founded EduBridge, an edtech platform designed to connect students worldwide with courses from American and European universities. From the start, my family dismissed the idea without hesitation. My father sneered that I was just sitting at a computer, chasing silly dreams, while my mother worried I wouldn't even have enough money to cover basic living expenses. But I clenched my teeth and endured. I believed in my vision, and I was willing to pay the price for it. The first 2 years were hell. I took on debt, survived on instant noodles, and sometimes slept on the office couch. But brick by brick, something started to take shape. We signed contracts with universities willing to pilot online programs, and then we attracted our first groups of students from India, Nigeria, and Brazil. The numbers grew slowly at first, then faster. Last year, EduBridge reached $2.5 million in revenue, with over $1 million in net profit. I remember the night I received the financial report. I broke down in tears alone in the office. Not because of the money, but because I had finally proven that the path I chose, no matter how filled with doubt, was the right one. Out there, partners called me one of the most promising young entrepreneurs in edtech. I was invited to speak at an education conference in Chicago, and Forbes published an interview about my work. Investors kept knocking, eager to pour in more capital to expand into the European market. Yet, in the eyes of my family, none of that seemed to exist. At family dinners, my father would still shake his head and say, "You should find a stable job at a proper company." My mother would compare me to my sister. "Look at Emily, 25 years old and already a manager in New York. She knows how to dress, how to network. That's what a successful daughter looks like." There has always been a bitter paradox in my life. Outside, society respected me as a young, successful entrepreneur, but inside my family, I was forever branded the failure. I could never understand why my parents only saw the glamorous shell Emily wore, those carefully staged photos on Instagram, the dazzling red dresses at parties, and called that success. Meanwhile, everything I had built with sweat, tears, intelligence, and relentless determination was dismissed as nothing more than wasting time at a computer. I had once tried to explain, once wanted to show them the financial reports or the articles written about me. But after each time seeing my father's indifferent eyes and my mother's mocking smile, I chose silence instead. I told myself that maybe one day the truth would speak for me. And tonight, at the very dinner I had organized, when they once again raised their glasses to praise Emily as someone who needed no one's help, I knew that moment had finally arrived. I sat there, letting them drown in their illusions, while inside me lay a vault of truths they had never cared to see. Natalie Morgan was not a failed dreamer. I was the one who had built a multi-million-dollar company from nothing, the one who had turned the dream of global education into reality. Yet the bitter truth was that, in order to be recognized, I not only had to fight for my place in the world, but I also had to confront my own family. And the words I let slip at tonight's dinner were only the beginning, the first crack in the facade, leading to the truth that would soon be exposed in full. 2 years ago, on a weekend evening, I received a call from Emily. Her voice trembled, breaking on the other end of the line before collapsing into sobs. I remember that moment vividly. I felt a rush of panic and worry for her, mixed with the uneasy suspicion that something was terribly wrong. Emily had always been the polished one, the sister who showed up in sparkling dresses, perfectly made up, wearing that flawless magazine cover smile. Hearing her crying so uncontrollably left me so unsettled that I jumped up from my chair, pacing around my small Palo Alto apartment as if I were the one in crisis. Between gasps and hiccuped sobs, Emily confessed the secret she had been hiding all along. She was drowning in debt. The luxury Manhattan apartment she rented to fit in with her wealthy friends was costing her nearly $4,000 a month. The expensive car she bought just to post photos online came with a crushing loan and costly maintenance. Her credit cards were maxed out from endless swipes on lavish restaurant meals, designer handbags and stilettos, and weekend getaways meant only to stage a few perfect Instagram shots. She pleaded, "Natalie, I'm about to lose everything. I can't cover rent this month, my credit card bills are past due, and I'm terrified the bank will sue me. I can't let Mom and Dad find out. If they did, I don't think I could ever face anyone again. Just a few months, I swear. Help me get through this, and I'll stand on my own again." I stayed silent for a long time after her plea. Inside me, a storm of conflict rose. I knew Emily was used to living for appearances, that she had never truly taken responsibility for her actions. But I also remembered the younger years, how she cried in my arms when classmates bullied her, how I carried her on my back through the rain so we wouldn't be late for school. I had always seen myself as the older sister responsible for protecting her. And in that moment, that protective instinct won over reason. I agreed. From that month on, I set up an automatic transfer. $5,000 each month from my company account straight into my sister's personal account. I told myself it was an emergency lifeline, a rope to keep her from falling off the edge. I believed it would only take a few months before Emily adjusted her lifestyle, cut down her spending, moved into a more affordable apartment, sold off some designer items to pay her debts, and slowly regained her balance. But the truth turned out to be the exact opposite. Instead of learning to live within her means, Emily treated the money I sent as a life raft to keep her floating in her glamorous world. She kept the Manhattan apartment, even upgrading it with more luxurious furniture. She continued showing up at cocktail parties, still posting rooftop brunch photos with captions full of confidence. Work hard, play hard because I deserve it. Others do. And so, my family, especially my parents, became even more convinced that Emily was the successful and independent daughter. They saw her dressed in designer clothes, living in a fancy apartment, driving an expensive car, surrounded by friends from big-name companies, and every gathering turned into a celebration of her supposed achievements. Meanwhile, I, the one actually funding all that glamour, was pushed aside, dismissed as the child with nothing to her name. What made it even more bitter was that Emily began weaving a story of her own success. She told our parents she had received a raise, that she had just landed a major project, that her company was considering promoting her to director. My father's eyes lit up as he listened, proudly retelling her words to friends and relatives. He never once questioned it, never once asked what I was doing. To him, only the image Emily displayed was worth believing. There were moments when I wanted to stop, moments when I wanted to speak the truth. But every time I saw Emily pleading, just a few more months, if I fall apart now, I'll lose everything, I softened again. I kept letting those $5,000 flow out of my account, steady as clockwork. I told myself it was the duty of an older sister. What I didn't realize was that my compassion had turned me into the very enabler of an illusion that stretched on for 2 whole years. While out there, I was struggling every single day to grow my company, wearing simple clothes, driving an old car so I could reinvest every dollar back into the business. Emily was living a life of luxury entirely funded by me. She became the golden child in my parents' eyes, the living proof of responsibility and independence, while I was pushed aside, labeled as the failure. Tonight, as I listened to my father raise his glass and repeat those hollow praises once again, I knew the time had come for the truth to be revealed. And the words I let slip at the dinner table. Perfect. Then from today on, you won't be needing the $5,000 I've been sending you anymore. Marked the end of 2 years of endurance, of silently fueling a false image for which I had never been acknowledged. The air in the room instantly grew heavy after my words. Every gaze turned toward me, filled with surprise, confusion, and even a hint of anger. Emily's face went pale, the fork in her hand trembling against the edge of her plate with a faint clink. She leaned toward me, whispering in a panicked voice, "You can't say this here, please, Natalie." But I no longer had the patience to cover for her. 2 years of silence, 2 years of being dismissed, 2 years of carrying the weight of this false image was more than enough. My father, David, slammed his wine glass down on the table, red liquid spilling across the white linen. His voice thundered, each word sharpened with rage. "What is this about? What did you just say, Natalie?" My mother, Linda, sat frozen, her eyes darting from me to Emily and back again, as if unable to believe what she had just heard. I drew in a deep breath, lifted my chin, and looked straight at my parents and the relatives around the table. My voice was calm, but every word rang out like a shattering bell. For the past 2 years, I've been sending Emily $5,000 a month. That's $120,000 in total. All of it has gone to maintain the lifestyle you've praised so endlessly, the luxury apartment, the car, the designer clothes, every bit of it. As my last word fell, the room sank into suffocating silence. A relative across the table dropped her fork, her eyes wide with shock. Emily broke down in tears, mascara running, black streaks cutting through the thick makeup on her cheeks. I'm sorry," she stammered. "I'm only a mid-level manager. I make $55,000 a year. I was never promoted like I said." My father stared at her, his face flushed, veins bulging across his forehead. "What?" he roared, his voice seething through clenched teeth. So all those times you boasted about new titles, about big bonuses, all of it was lies? Emily bowed her head, trembling, unable to lift her eyes to his. My father, David, slammed his wine glass down on the table, red liquid rippling and spilling across the white cloth. His voice rang out, each word sharp and heavy. What is this? What did you just say, Natalie? My mother, Linda, sat frozen, her eyes flicking from me to Emily and back again, unable to believe what she had just heard. I took a deep breath, lifted my head high, and looked directly at my parents and the relatives gathered around. My tone was steady, but every sentence struck like a bell breaking apart. For the past 2 years, I've been sending Emily $5,000 a month. That's $120,000 in total. All of it went to sustain the lifestyle you've endlessly praised, the luxury apartment, the car, the designer clothes. Every bit of it. I'd tell. The moment my words ended, the room plunged into suffocating silence. A relative across the table dropped her fork, her eyes wide with shock. Emily burst into tears, mascara smudging, dark streaks cutting through the heavy makeup on her cheeks. I'm sorry, she stammered. I'm only a mid-level manager. I make $55,000 a year. I was never promoted like I said. My father's face turned crimson, veins rising across his forehead. What? He roared, his voice hissing through clenched teeth. So, every time you boasted to me about new titles, about big bonuses, all of it was lies. Emily lowered her head, trembling, unable to lift her eyes to meet his. I sat there, calmly watching, a tide of mixed emotions rising inside me, both pain and relief. For 2 years, I had swallowed every injustice, listening to the hollow praises my parents showered on my sister, while I was the one silently paying the price. Tonight, at last, the truth had been dragged into the light. My mother pressed her hand to her forehead, murmuring, "This can't be, Emily, you deceived your own parents?" Her voice shook, as though she could not reconcile that the perfect youngest daughter had only been a facade. Emily collapsed into her chair, covering her face with trembling hands, her sobs breaking in her throat. I didn't want to disappoint you. I was afraid that if I admitted I wasn't successful, you would look down on me, I thought. If I could just maintain the image long enough, then one day it would become real. I only needed more time. Her confession thickened the air, pressing down heavier with each word. My father turned toward me, his eyes filled with both shame and anger. And you, Natalie? Why did you stay silent for 2 years? Why didn't you tell us? I answered slowly, my voice firm and unshaken. Because I wanted to protect the family's dignity. I thought if Emily only needed a little support before she changed, then it was worth it. But she never stopped. And while you kept comparing me to Emily, I knew any explanation of mine would only be dismissed, so I stayed silent until tonight. My father sat in stunned silence, his hands clenched tightly on the white tablecloth, his eyes clouded as though he had just taken a crushing blow. The air in the room, already cold, grew so tense it felt as if it could be cut with a knife. I knew he was struggling to piece together the fragments of a story he had believed for years. Emily was the golden child, and I was nothing more than the failure glued to her computer. Look. I lifted my head, meeting his gaze, my voice steady but unyielding. If you want to know what I've been doing all this time, here's your answer. Last year, my company, EduBridge, generated $2.5 million in revenue. After expenses, our net profit was over $1 million. I built it from nothing, and now we're expanding into the European market. My words struck like lightning across a silent sky. Relatives around the table snapped their heads toward me, my mother raised a hand to her mouth, and my father sat frozen, his face shifting from confusion to shock. He repeated in a hoarse voice, $1 million in profit? I nodded, my eyes never leaving his. Yes. And everything you've admired about Emily, the apartment, the car, the designer clothes was sustained by the $5,000 I sent her every month for the past 2 years. That is the truth. That was. Emily jolted, whipping her head toward me, her face streaked with smudged mascara, her trembling hands clasped together in desperation. "Please, Natalie, don't cut the money. If you stop, I'll lose everything. My apartment, my car, my credit cards, I can't pay for any of it. I'll fall apart." Her voice cracked, stripped of every trace of the pride that had once made her the so-called successful child my parents so proudly paraded. I sat in silence for a few seconds, each heartbeat pounding like a war drum. For 2 years, I had allowed my sister to lean on me to build this illusion, while I endured the contempt of my own parents. But in that moment, I knew I had to stop. I picked up my phone and opened the banking app. My fingers moved across the screen, each tap severing the invisible rope that had bound me for so long. When I finished, I turned the screen so everyone at the table could see. "The automatic transfer of $5,000 each month," I said evenly, "is officially canceled from today." I set the phone down on the table, the screen still glowing with the message, "Recurring transfer canceled." In the heavy silence, Emily's sobs tore through the air. She slumped into her chair, trembling hands clutching the napkin, her voice breaking. "You can't abandon me now. I have no way to manage this. I need that money to survive. I promise I'll change. I just need a little more time." Mascara, stained tears streamed down her face, smudging the carefully painted mask she had worked so hard to maintain. I looked at my sister, my heart still carrying the faint softness of an older sibling, but my reason had risen stronger. I knew that if I kept opening my wallet, I would only trap myself in the same cycle, while she would never learn to stand on her own. "Emily," I said, slowly but firmly, "I won't ask you to return the $120,000 you've already received. Consider it an expensive lesson for both of us. But I won't send you another dollar. I cannot keep feeding a lie while sitting here watching our parents worship you on the back of my hard-earned money." I paused, turning my eyes toward my parents, every word aimed straight at their hearts. "And you need to hear this clearly. It's time for this family to stop judging by appearances. Success is not measured by a flashy apartment, or by a title that means nothing, or by curated photos on Instagram. Success is measured by the real value someone creates. And I have proven that whether you ever cared to listen or not." My father lowered his head, his veined hands clasped tightly together, silent as though no words could justify what had been revealed. My mother blinked rapidly before letting out a quiet sigh, her shoulders trembling. The two people who once so proudly raised their glasses to toast their golden child now looked small, remorseful, and weighed down with shame. My father finally spoke, his voice heavy. "We were wrong. All these years, we blindly believed in what was easy to see, without ever asking questions or caring about the truth. We let you carry far too much." Lo. Emily lifted her tear-streaked face, her eyes red and swollen, clinging desperately to a shred of dignity. "But you still love me, don't you? I only wanted you to be proud of me." I turned to her, my voice slow but firm. "Real love doesn't need to be built on walls of pretense. You chose the path of showing off, of hiding the truth, and now you're paying the price. If you truly want Mom and Dad to be proud of you, then live within your means. Prove yourself with your own efforts, not with my money." The room sank into a long, heavy silence. I realized that my words weren't just for Emily, but for my parents as well. For years, they had weighed everything on the scales of appearances and forgotten real value. They admired my sister's designer dresses but dismissed my simple shirt. They were proud of Emily's Manhattan apartment but never cared to see the multi-million-dollar company I was building. Now, I was forcing them to face the truth they had long chosen to ignore. My mother gently took my hand, her voice breaking. "Natalie, I'm sorry. I never imagined that what you've achieved was this great. You always looked so simple, and I assumed you had nothing." I looked at her, a wave of sadness and relief rising in me. "Mom, sometimes simplicity holds far more than what the eye can see. What I need is not pity or comparison. I only need respect, to be seen for my true worth." "All in." My father lifted his head, his eyes red from holding back emotion. You're right. We were biased, blind. I thought success had to follow the path I understood: titles, steady paychecks, things that were easy to boast about. I never listened when you tried to explain. And now, I am ashamed. He turned to Emily, his voice firmer. You need to learn how to live honestly, Emily. Don't expect your sister to save you ever again. If you want respect, you must earn it with your own strength. How? Emily broke down, burying her head in her arms. My father's words were the final blow, cutting through the illusion she had clung to. I didn't feel triumph, nor did I feel victorious. What I felt was relief, as if, after all these years, I had finally drawn a clear line. I was no longer the shadow propping up someone else's false glow. I had spoken my truth, and they had no choice but to hear it. The dinner that was meant to celebrate me had turned into a tribunal of truth. But in that very place, I set new boundaries. I would no longer allow myself to be used, no longer allow myself to be dismissed, and I forced my family to change the way they saw me. My parents bowed their heads in shame, and Emily collapsed, facing raw reality for the very first time. And I knew, from that moment on, none of us could ever return to the sweet lies of the past. Just 1 month after that chaotic graduation dinner, it was as if my family had been turned onto a completely new page. Every mask, every false shimmer, vanished in an instant, leaving only truths each of us was forced to confront. For me, the first change came in what seemed like a small detail. My bank account no longer drained $5,000 every month. The money that had disappeared with clockwork regularity, as though it were some invisible obligation, now stayed where it belonged. And I chose to invest it into something that truly mattered: my own company. EduBridge, the creation I had built from sleepless nights and countless keystrokes, now had the chance to reach further. I immediately reinvested. Hiring a marketing team in Berlin, signing contracts with 2 universities in Germany and the Netherlands, and upgrading our servers to better serve international students. Within just 4 weeks, new registrations climbed by nearly 30%, and revenue ticked upward each day. Sitting alone in the office at night, watching the glowing green numbers on the screen, I knew that the money which once vanished into Emily's red dresses and rooftop parties had finally found its rightful place. In stark contrast, Emily began her freefall. The glamorous Manhattan apartment once flaunted on Instagram became an unbearable burden. She was forced to give it up, packing her things in tears, moving into a cramped studio in Brooklyn barely 30 square meters wide. Gone were the cleaning services, gone was the luxurious furniture. For the first time, she had to learn how to do her own laundry, cook simple meals, and compare prices at the supermarket to save every dollar. The wardrobe that once overflowed with designer clothes now stood hollow, as one Gucci bag, one Prada purse after another was sold off cheaply online or pawned away. The change didn't just take place in her new apartment, it unfolded publicly on social media, the very place where Emily had built her golden child image. Her Instagram once had tens of thousands of followers, filled with glamorous snapshots, glittering dresses at rooftop parties, a Chanel bag posed perfectly on a cafe table, the Manhattan skyline glowing through her apartment window. But once the flow of money from me stopped, so did the stream of new photos. Emily began recycling old ones, desperately trying to hide the truth. One day it was a picture at a fancy cafe from a year ago, the next it was the red dress from a long-past party. At first, her followers still liked the posts, but slowly, they began to notice the repetition. Comments started to appear. Emily, why haven't you shared about work lately? What happened to that district manager promotion you said was coming? She tried to maintain the illusion with vague captions, like, learning to enjoy the simple things, but her followers, so used to her extravagant image, weren't easily convinced. Likes dropped, some people unfollowed, and others called her out directly. Are you really a senior manager like you claimed? The pressure grew unbearable. I heard that one night she cried until her eyes were swollen after a former colleague publicly commented, "Our company doesn't even have the position you bragged about." The friends who once crowded around Emily at cocktail parties, eager to be photographed by her side, slowly disappeared. When they realized she could no longer split the bill, the dinner invitations at rooftop restaurants, and the weekend getaways vanished like soap bubbles. The image of a young woman sitting alone in a cramped apartment, staring at a silent phone, stood in stark contrast to the days when her calendar overflowed with events. It must have been a bitter pill to swallow. The breaking point came when Emily shut down her Instagram account altogether. One morning, I tried to visit her profile and found only the words, "This account is private." A few weeks later, it was gone completely, leaving tens of thousands of followers bewildered. The aura she had carefully built on the back of my money crumbled in just a few short months. Emily was no longer the golden child, but simply a young woman struggling to navigate the modest life she had once looked down on. While Emily still stumbled through her new, simpler life, my father David was also forced to confront the truth he had avoided for far too long. After weeks of silence, he finally called me, his voice hesitant and awkward, stripped of the authority and judgment it once carried. "Natalie, could you tell me about your company? I really want to understand." For a moment, I froze. It was the first time in my life he had ever asked about my work without a trace of criticism. I began to tell him, plainly and without embellishment, about the early days of the startup with just 3 of us working out of a tiny rented room, about the first contracts we signed with shaking hands, about the times investors rejected us so harshly I cried alone afterward, and the tears of joy that came when revenue finally reached 6 figures. He listened quietly, sighing from time to time, and at one point murmured, "I never realized. Those late nights you spent at your computer weren't a waste after all." At the end, his voice came slow and heavy. "I was wrong. I saw you through the wrong lens." For the first time in years, I heard genuine respect in my father's voice. From then on, his calls were no longer filled with condescending advice, but with earnest questions. "How's your marketing strategy in Europe? Are you having trouble with staffing? Is there anything I can do to help?" I didn't need his help, but the fact that he wanted to listen, that he wanted to understand, was enough to ease something inside me. And then, at a family gathering in Sacramento, he stood up, looked around the room, and spoke clearly. "For years, I was wrong. I blindly praised Emily, while it is Natalie who has truly been successful and responsible." His words swept across the room like an unfamiliar wind. The eyes that once looked at me with pity now shifted to surprise, then curiosity, and finally, respect. I didn't need applause, nor did I crave belated praise. My father's acknowledgement alone was enough to begin healing the wounds I had carried for so long. My mother, Linda, changed as well. She had once been the woman who proudly flaunted Emily's dresses and handbags to the neighbors while dismissing my simple button-down shirts. But one day, she sat beside me, her hand trembling as it held mine, and whispered, "I'm sorry, I was shallow. I never looked at what you truly accomplished, I only cared about appearances. Now I see that you are my greatest pride." I sat in silence, stunned, because I had never imagined hearing those words from her. The years I had endured pushing forward while being dismissed finally reached a just conclusion. Emily's downfall didn't give me satisfaction. I didn't smile as I watched her sell off handbags or work overtime to pay debts. But I knew it was necessary. Only by shedding the facade could Emily learn the lessons of honesty and responsibility. And as for me, I no longer carried the burden of sustaining someone else's illusion. True success, I came to realize, doesn't need to be proven through flashy clothes, glittering titles, or carefully staged photos on social media. Success requires only one thing: time. Sooner or later, the truth will speak for itself, echoing louder than any lie. And in my case, that truth not only freed me from the shadow of being dismissed, but also forced my entire family to reevaluate what real value truly means, the value that had always been there, only hidden for far too long. I am Natalie Morgan, and if there is one final message I want to leave you with, the one listening to my story, it is this. Never allow your worth to be defined by appearances or by someone else's prejudice. Stay persistent in doing what is right, keep creating true value for this life. Because sometimes, the sweetest revenge is not in arguing or proving, but in letting the truth rise on its own, louder, stronger, and undeniable. And when that moment comes, you won't need to say another word.